Hey everyone, in today's video we are talking all about decodable readers. In this video I'm going to share just a couple quick facts about decodable readers. I will share a few of my favorite companies that make great decodable readers, and then I have 5 easy tips for you to think about when you are developing lessons using decodable readers. Like many of you probably watching, decodable readers weren't a staple in my classroom a decade ago. I really just didn't have access to many of them when I started teaching. We had a lot of leveled readers, and I do remember having some like phonics, like my first phonics books from Scholastic, and even so much so we barely had any of those as well. Finding access to these phonics books was so hard that I actually created phonics poems back in 2013, 2014. It is one of my most popular selling things on TPT, but they are not decodable. When I was writing them, again, decodable texts weren't on my radar, so the phonics poems, while they definitely focus on a phonics pattern, they aren't what you would deem decodable by many standards. But creating those was kind of that beginning step for me to start to incorporate more phonics-based reading, especially in small group with my students. So in today's video, I do want to talk about what decodable readers are and really just some ways to use them most effectively with your students. So if you are ready, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and let's get started. So quickly before we dive in, what is a decodable reader? A decodable reader is either a passage or a text that is largely decodable, meaning students can decode the words based on a phonics pattern that they are learning. So a decodable reader will be phonics based, and it will have a focus skill that you are teaching to your students, and most of the words in that text are going to have that skill, so students can decode it. The other words in the text, not the phonics skilled ones, might be a little mix of high frequency words. There might be some patterns that students have already learned before. So if you are working on consonant blends, let's say, beginning consonant blends, you will have plenty of other words in that decodable text. Most of them will fall into the category of you've already taught that pattern before. So just like the phonics lessons you're teaching in class, the text that you're using to go along with them, these decodable texts, they should also be sequential in nature. So meaning they should follow some sort of sequence that makes sense in terms of the skills students are learning. In terms of what percentage of the words in the text need to be decodable in order for it to count as a decodable text, well, experts kind of vary on that, but about 75 to 80% seems to be the most common answer for that question. So just to clarify, that means that 75 to 80% of the words in the decodable text should be decodable to students based on either the phonics skill that they're learning or phonics skills that they've learned previously. Another common question asked is, where can I find decodable text? So I wanted to share a few of my favorites. First are flyleaf decodables. These ones are really engaging. They have great illustrations as well as great photographs for students to read. And of course they follow a nice scope and sequence, so you can kind of work along with that. And I just watched a school board meeting for my son's school, where they go to school and where I work, and they just got approved the funding to buy a whole set of flyleaf decodables for their classroom, so that's very exciting. Some other options are Bug Club Phonics. These are by Pearson. Here's a quick look at what they look like. But again, you are going to want to use your knowledge to discern any, good decodables by making sure that they're about 75 to 80% decodable, and make sure they are engaging for your students. And lastly, there's actually just phonicsbooks.com. I know they have a UK site, but they also have a US site, so the spellings will be consistent with US spellings as well. Now, I do want to mention that you can find plenty of decodable texts and passages over on TPT, but you do want to use your discretion. Again, just like when looking at any other decodables, you want to make sure that they are engaging, that they actually are decodable. So take a look at some of the passages, read them yourself, and again, use your own discretion there. But there are some great ones. All right, once you get your hands on some good decodable texts, let's talk about how to use them effectively. First and foremost, you're going to want to use these longer texts and passages in small groups. While we do a lot of phonics instruction and phonemic awareness instruction whole group, as we should, these texts are really going to be most beneficial for a targeted group of students, because decodable texts really focus on one skill at a time, and your students are going to be working at various levels. And remember, decodable means that the students will know how to actually decode 80% of the words based on their level, right? So what's decodable to one student isn't necessarily going to be decodable to another. So once you've chosen the correct decodable text for your small group based on whatever pattern or skill they are working on, we can still do some before reading activities. If you're used to balanced literacy, a lot of the things that we can work on are going to be similar, so it's great to remember that so you can pull from those ideas. Now, before you hand over a brand new decodable text to your students, the first step is going to be to review that target skill. Remember, each decodable passage or text has a skill that is going to be the focus there, so you want to review that explicitly with your students first. Get out a small little whiteboard, you might want to have them have theirs too, and review what the skill is. If we're working on beginning blends, remind them we will hear two sounds. A blend still has both sounds. Let's pretend we're working on L blends, so that L will be the second letter. And then go ahead and have students practice decoding words in isolation that have that skill. This is going to be pretty quick. You don't need to do this for, 5-10 minutes. You just need to practice a few of those words, remind students of what they do when they come across those words, and practice blending them out. This does not have to take a long time, but it is important to kind of warm up your students, review the skill explicitly, and have them practice actually blending those sounds together so they are prepared to do this in their text. Also, before reading the text, you will want to go ahead and pre-teach some of the words that your students may come across that are just a little too tricky. You don't need to pre-teach every other word that isn't decodable. You can let students try to figure it out. It might give you a little insight on kind of where they're at with that type of word pattern. But if there's a word in there that maybe is like an R-controlled vowel and you just haven't got there yet, and you don't need your students to be stressed out about that one word, feel free to go ahead and pre-teach it. If it is a high frequency word, feel free to pre-teach it. Of course, you'll always read the decodable text before you give them to your students, so really think about the group you're working with and pick out a few words that might need to be pre-taught so you can do that before they read. Okay, so step one was before they even have the book, right? It was review the skill, it was have them practice decoding that skill in isolation, and go ahead and pre-teach any words you think are necessary. Now, step two is going to be very similar to what we would do if you were doing balanced literacy guided reading groups. You can actually still have them look at the cover, make some predictions, read the text, right? Read the title, and ask them some questions. Have them ask questions. What do they think is going to happen in this story? We still want to activate any prior knowledge. We still want to go ahead and see if they have predictions and get them asking questions, because again, reading isn't just about decoding, it's about comprehension. And decoding is a means to comprehending. The questions you ask and what conversations may arise while looking at the book cover will depend on each individual book, but go ahead and ask students, what they're thinking. Get them ready for the text. Which moves us to step number 3, which is where students are going to read the text. Now, just again, like balanced literacy with a guided reading group, you're going to want to do this with your small group, and you can do this a few different ways. You can do a little echo reading, you can do a little choral reading, but you do want to make sure that you're listening to each and every student in that small group read the text. Personally, depending on the length of the book, I like to have about 1/3 of the text read chorally, so aloud together. Sometimes we'll do a little echo reading if students need that, but I want to make sure I can hear all, 4 to 5 students in my group and offer any feedback directly as needed. I want to offer that feedback right away. Based on that initial, read aloud and I'm listening to them, as long as we're not getting too tripped up, I then like to move to whisper reading. So everyone in the group is whisper reading and I kind of lean in and I'm able to work one-on-one within my small groups. And again, I can offer feedback as needed. So step number 4 is after students have read the text, I like them to go back into it and highlight the pattern that we were working on, the target skill, right? If it's a paper and pencil text, we can actually get a highlighter, go back in and highlight the words with that pattern. If it is a real book, we can kind of all work together and point out the words, and then I like to write them on the whiteboard, get a good handful of them to practice. Now, many teachers like to do this before they actually read the text, and I understand why, because, it helps students as they come across those words. If they already highlighted it, they're like, oh, that's the skill we're working on. These are beginning blends, right? I know this, we just reviewed this. Let me go ahead and attack this word. Which does make sense and it's a complete preference. I just don't, especially as the passages get longer, I might do that with a shorter passage, but as the passages and text get longer, I don't love having them kind of sift through a whole text, especially one that's largely decodable, and just search for specific words instead of attacking it, instead of just reading it and diving into the story. So again, personal preference. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Let me know down in the comments. Do you usually have them do it before or after? Do you have any ideas around it? Let me know. And last but not least, step number 5 is to ask questions and have them put their books in their book bins. Again, decoding is just a means to comprehension. Learning to read is so we can learn the world around us and understand what's happening. So we want to ask good questions, both higher level and lower level, about the story we read or about the passage. That's really the main reason these decodable texts might be only 75% decodable, because we do need students to engage with it. That needs to be exciting to them. It needs to have some sort of premise, some sort of questions that we can ask, instead of it being, 100% decodable and it doesn't even make sense. So make sure you're doing a comprehension check and then have students put it in their book bins or their book baggies so they have access to that text. Don't just take it and put it away. They should have it for at least a week, so during any independent reading time, they can feel confident reading that book over and over and practice their fluency. So there you have some of my tips on how to use decodable readers. I hope this video was helpful to you. We talked a little bit about what decodable readers are. I gave you some examples of some ones that I enjoy, and then I shared kind of 5 steps to always think about or at least walk through when you're using decodables with your students. If you have any questions, always drop it down in the comments. And as always, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new video. See you in the next one. Bye.